Continuing the Viking Portable Library's World Bible, edited by Robert O. Ballou. The Hindu. Selections from the Hindu scriptures. From the Upanishads. Universal Self. One. In the beginning was this self alone, in the shape of a person. He, looking round, saw nothing but his self. He feared, and therefore any one who is lonely fears. He thought, as there is nothing but myself, why should I fear? Thence his fear passed away. For what should he have feared? Verily, fear arises from a second only. So fear is secondary for the baby. But he felt no delight. He wished for a second. He was so large as man and wife together. He then made this his self to fall in two, and thence arose husband and wife. He knew, I indeed am this creation, for I created all this. And when they say sacrifice to this or sacrifice to that god, each god is but his manifestation, for he is all gods. Again, the projections of yourself, attaching, treated as gods, are entities that are connected to such. And the polytheist. He, Brahman or the self, cannot be seen, for in part only, when breathing, he is breath by name. When speaking, speech by name. When seeing, eye by name. When hearing, ear by name. When thinking, mind by name. All these are but names of his acts. And, so thinking is a very important part of religion, contrary to what those who hate religion are going to want us to tell you. The first note here says that the word self here must not be interpreted to mean the individual personal self, as we use the word in English, nor as soul as it is sometimes translated, an adequate rendering. What is meant here is the universal soul, or universal self, which is in each of us, that self which existed before all else, which is the source of all life and being. Perhaps the conception in Western thought most nearly akin to it is God within us, instead of being the egotistical concept which on the causal inspection it may seem to be. It is, on the contrary, the most extreme humility before that essence of divinity which pervades the human soul and mind. And onwards. And he who worships, regards, him as the one or the other does not know him, for he is apart from this, when qualified by the one or the other. Let men worship him as self, for in the self all these are one. This self is the footstep of everything, for through it one knows everything, and as one can find again by footsteps what was lost, thus he who knows this finds glory and praise. This, which is nearer to us than anything, this self, is dearer than a son, dearer than wealth, dearer than all else. And if one were to say to one who declares another than the self dear, then he would lose what is dear to him. Very likely it would be so. Let him worship the self alone as dear. He who worships the self alone is dear. The object of his love will never perish. Now if a man worships another deity, thinking the deity is one, and he another, he does not know. Part 2. Now, when the Yajna Valkya was going to enter upon another state, he said, Maitreya. There's all these Maitreya conspiracies, if you look into it. Verily, I am going away from this my house into the forest. I forget what Maitreya means. What does it mean? Forsooth, let me make a settlement between thee and the Katyayani, my other wife. Maitreya said, My lord, if this whole earth, full of wealth, belonged to me, tell me, should I be immortal by it? No, replied Yajnavalkya, the life of rich people will be thy life, but there is no hope of immortality by wealth. And Maitreya said, What should I do with that by which I do not become immortal? What my lord knoweth of immortality, tell that to me. Yajnavalkya replied, Thou who art truly dear to me, thou speakest dear words. Come, sit down. I will explain to thee, and mark well what I say. And he said, Verily, a husband is not dear, that you may love the husband, but that you may love the self through the husband. Therefore, a husband is dear. Verily, a wife is not dear, that you may love the wife, but that you may love the self through the wife. Therefore, a wife is dear. Verily, sons are not dear, that you may love the sons, but that you may love the self through the sons. Therefore, sons are dear. Verily, wealth is not dear, that you may love wealth, but you may love the self through the wealth. Therefore, wealth is dear. Verily, the Brahmin class is not dear, that you may love the Brahmin class, but that you may love the self through the Brahmin class. Therefore, the Brahmin class is dear. Verily, the Kshatriya class is not dear, that you may love the Kshatriya class, but that you may love the self through the Kshatriya class. Therefore, the Kshatriya class is dear. Verily, the worlds are not dear, that you may love the worlds, but that you may love the self through the worlds. Therefore, the worlds are dear. Verily, the devas are not dear, that you may love the devas, but that you may love the self through the devas. Therefore, the devas are dear. Verily, the creatures are not dear, that you may love the creatures, but that you may love the self through the creatures. Therefore, the creatures are dear. Therefore, everything is not dear, that you may love everything, but that you may love the self through everything. Therefore, everything is dear. Now, remember these 5 stages of love. You got the love of the servant, slave, devotee, and the master. And then you have the love of the friend. Then you have the love of the parent-child. Then you have the love of the spouse. And then you have the socially inappropriate love. Yes, love the world, but love God more than all else. And show your love of God through. Anyways. Verily, the self is to be seen, to be heard, to be perceived, to be marked. O Maitreya, when we see, hear, perceive, and know the self, then all this is known. As all waters find their center in the sea, all touches in the skin, all tastes in the tongue, all smells in the nose, and all colors in the eye, all sounds in the ear, all precepts in the mind, all knowledge in the heart, all actions in the hands, all movements in the feet, and all the Vedas in speech. As a lump of salt, when thrown into the water, becomes dissolved into water, it could not be taken out again. But wherever we taste the water, it is salt. Thus, verily, O Maitreya, does this great being, endless, unlimited, consisting of nothing but knowledge, rise from out of these elements and vanish again in them. This is enough, O beloved, for wisdom. Yes, we know our Creator through the creation. For when there is duality, then one sees the other One smells the other, one hears the other, one salutes the other, one perceives the other, one knows the other. But when the self only is all this, how should he smell another? How should he see another? How should he hear another? How should he salute another? How should he perceive another? How should he know another? How should he know him by whom he knows all this? How, O beloved, should he know himself, the knower? The house of death. Vajas Ravasa, desirous of heavenly rewards, surrenders at a sacrifice all that he possesses. He has a son named Nachiketas. When the promised presents are being given to the priest, faith enters into the heart of Nachiketas, who is still a boy. Nachiketas, thinking, unblessed surely are the worlds to which man goes by giving his promised present at a sacrifice, cows which have drunk water, eaten hay, given their milk, and are barren. Why not give the best of your animals as sacrifice instead of the ones that are no longer producing? Knowing that his father has promised to give up all that he possesses, and therefore his son also speaks to his father. Nachiketas, dear father, to whom wilt thou give me? His father does not answer. Nachiketas again, dear father, to whom wilt thou give me? Still his father does not answer. Nachiketas for the third time, dear father, to whom wilt thou give me? Vajas Ravasa, angrily, I shall give thee unto death. Nachiketas, as if to himself, as I go as the first, at the head of many who have still to die. I go in the midst of many who are now dying. What will be the work of Yama, the ruler of the departed, which today he has to do unto me? Look back how it was with those who came before. Look forward how it will be with those who came hereafter. A mortal ripens like corn. Like corn he springs up again. Nachiketas enters into the abode of Yama, death, and there is no one to receive him. Thereupon one of the attendants of Yama speaks. The attendant, fire enters into the houses. When a Brahmana enters as a guest, that fire is quenched by this peace offering. Bring water. Avevasvata, a Brahmana that dwells in the house of a foolish man without receiving food to eat destroys his hopes and expectations, his possessions, his righteousness, his sacred and his good deeds, and all his sons and cattle. Yama, returning to his house, after an absence of 3 nights, during which time Nachiketas has received no hospitality from him, speaks in apology. Death says, O Brahmana, as thou, a venerable guest, hast dwelt in my house 3 nights without eating, therefore choose now 3 boons. Hail to thee and welfare to me. Remember how they later say that Jesus died, went to hell for 3 days and came back. And anyways, think about where that came from. Nachiketas, O death, as the first of the 3 boons, I choose that Gautama, my father, be pacified, kind and free from anger towards me, and that he may know me and greet me when I shall have been dismissed by thee. Death, through my favors, thy father will know thee, and be again towards thee as he was before. He shall sleep peacefully through the night, and free from anger. And after having seen thee freed from the mouth of death, Nachiketas says, in the heaven world there is no fear. Thou art not there, O death, and no one is afraid on account of old age, leaving behind both hunger and thirst, and out of the reach of sorrow all rejoice in the world of heaven. Thou knowest, O death, the fire sacrifice which leads us to heaven. Tell it to me, for I am full of faith. those who live in the heaven world reach immortality. This I ask as my second boon. Death. I tell it to thee, learn it from me, and when thou understandest that fire sacrifice which leadeth to heaven, know, O Nachiketas, that it is the attainment of the endless worlds, and their firm support hidden in darkness. Death then tells him of that fire sacrifice, the beginning of all the worlds, and what bricks are required for the altar, and how many, and how they are to be placed, and Nachiketas repeats all as it has been told to him. And then Death goes on again. I give thee now another boon. That fire sacrifice shall be named after thee. Choose, O Nachiketas, thy third boon. Nachiketas, there is that doubt when a man is dead, some saying he is, others he is not. This I should like to know, taught by thee. This is the third of my boons. Death. On this point, even the gods, and I'm not sure what they mean by gods here. Well, things treated as gods, anyways, have doubted formally. It is not easy to understand. That subject is subtle. Choose another boon, O Nachiketas, do not press me, and let me take off that boon. And let me off that boon. Okay. So Nachiketas is told about some gods that can't be gods because, why would a god doubt? A god would know, wouldn't a god? On this point, even the gods have doubted indeed, and thou, Death, has declared it be not easy to understand, and another teacher like thee is not to be found. Surely no other boon is like unto this. And Death says again, choose sons and grandsons who shall live 100 years, herds of cattle, elephants, gold and horses. Choose the wide abode of earth, and live thyself as many harvests as thou desirest. If thou canst think of any boon equal to that, choose wealth and long life. Be king, Nachiketas, on the wide earth, and make thee the enjoyer of all desires. Whatever desires are difficult to attain among mortals, ask for them according to thy wish. These fair maidens with their chariots and musical instruments, such are indeed not to be obtained by men. Be waited on by them, whom I give to thee, but do not ask me about dying. Nachiketas says, these things last till tomorrow, O Death, for they wear out this vigor of all the senses. Even the whole of life is short. Keep thou thy horses, keep dance and song for thyself. No man can be made happy by wealth. Shall we possess wealth when we see thee? Shall we live as long as thou rulest? Only that boon which I have chosen is to be chosen by me. What mortal, slowly decaying here below, and knowing, after having approached them, the freedom from decay enjoyed by the immortals, would delight in a long life after he has pondered on the pleasures which arise from beauty and love? No, that on which there is this doubt, O Death, tell us what there is in that great hereafter. Nachiketas does not choose another boon, but that which enters into the hidden world. Death. The good is one thing, the pleasant another. These two, having different objects, chain a man. It is well with him who clings to the good. He who chooses the pleasant misses his end. The good and pleasant approach. The wise goes round about them and distinguishes them. Yea, the wise prefers the good to the pleasant, but the foul chooses the pleasant through greed and avarice. Thou, Nachiketas, after pondering all pleasures that are or seem delightful, hast dismissed them all. Thou hast not gone into the road that leadeth to wealth, in which many men perish. And when that's the purpose of life, yeah, people tend not to live as long. But also, people perish in another way when they earn their wealth unlawfully and are unhappy because they can't find gratitude, because they always want more. It's fine to want more, but let's find some gratitude. Wide apart and leading to different points are these two, ignorance and what is known as wisdom. I believe Netacitus to be one who desires knowledge, for even many pleasures did not tear thee away. Fools dwelling in darkness, wise in their own conceit, and puffed up with vain knowledge, go round and round, staggering to and fro like blind men, led by the blind. The hereafter never rises before the eyes of the careless child, deluded by the delusion of wealth. This is the world, he thinks. There is no other. Thus he falls again and again under my sway. The knowing self is not born. It dies not. It sprang from nothing. Nothing sprang from it. The ancient is unborn, eternal, everlasting. He is not killed, though the body is killed. And if the killer thinks that he kills, if the killed thinks that he is killed, they do not understand. For this one does not kill, nor is that one killed. The self, smaller than small, greater than great, is hidden in the heart of that creature. A man who is free from desires and free from grief sees the majesty of the self by the grace of the Creator. And remember that bit in chapter 5 of The Blonde Stranger in the Creek, the bedtime story? Take off your clothes, your roll clothes, your skin clothes, your body clothes. I forget how it goes, but that's what I'm talking about here is we are, yeah, I have names. I have this body. I do stuff, but I am beyond that. Just as you're beyond your names and your roles and your forms and all that. Anyways, death continues. Know the self to be sitting in the chariot. The tarot card of this month is the Chariot, by the way. The intellect of the charioteer, and the mind, the reins. The senses they call the horses, the objects of the senses their roads. When he, the highest self, is in union with the body, the senses, and the mind, then wise people call him the enjoyer. And some people go so far as say, women should be the enjoyed, men should be the enjoyer. Well, come on, we're both. He who has no understanding, and whose mind, the reins, is never firmly held, his senses, horses, are unmanageable, like vicious horses of a charioteer. But he who has understanding, and whose mind is always firmly held, his senses are under control, like good horses of a charioteer. The mode of passion, ignorance, and goodness has three horses. You can kind of see that. He who has no understanding, who is unmindful and always impure, never reaches that place, but enters into the round of births. But he who has understanding, who is mindful and always pure, reaches indeed that place, whence he is not born again. But he who has understanding for his charioteer, and who holds the reins of the mind, he reaches the end of his journey, and that is the highest place of Vishnu. When that incorporated Brahman, who dwells in the body, is torn away and freed from the body, what remains then? No mortal lives by the breath that goes up and by the breath that goes down. We live by another, in whom these two repose. You can't breathe the dead body back to life. I'm sure somebody by that time would have tried, and nope, something other than the breath, people. Well then, O Gautama, I shall tell thee this mystery The old Brahman. And what happens to the self after reaching death? Some enter the womb in order to have a body. As organic beings, others go into inorganic matter, according to their work and according to their knowledge. As the one fire, after it has entered the world, though one, becomes different according to whatever it burns, thus the one self within all things becomes different, according to whatever it enters and exits also without. As the one air, after it has entered the world, through one, becomes different according to whatever it enters. Thus the one self within all things becomes different, according to whatever it enters and exists also without. As the sun, the eye of the whole world, is not contaminated by the external impurities seen by the eyes, thus the one self within all things is never contaminated by the misery of the world, being himself without. Transcend your emotions. There is one ruler, the self within all things, who makes the one form manifold. The wise who perceive him within their self, to them belongs eternal happiness, not to others. There is one eternal thinker, thinking non-eternal thoughts, who, through one, fulfills the desires of many. The wise who perceives him within their self, to them belongs eternal peace, not to others. The sun does not shine there, nor the moon and the stars, nor these lightnings, and much less this fire. When he shines, everything shines after him. By his light, all this is lighted. Transcend the intellect. Whatever there is, the whole world, when gone forth from the Brahman, trembles in its breath. That Brahman is a great terror, like a drawn sword. Those who know it become immortal. From terror of Brahman fire burns. From terror the sun burns. From terror Indra and Vayu and death, as the fifth, run away. If a man cannot understand this before the falling asunder of his body, then he has to take body again in the worlds of creation. So the idea of reincarnation is starting to appear. Beyond the senses is this mind. Beyond the mind is the highest created being. Higher than that being is the great self. Higher than the great, the highest undeveloped. Beyond the undeveloped is the person, the all-pervading and entirely imperceptible. Every creature that knows him is liberated and obtains immortality. His form is not to be seen. No one beholds him with the eye. He is imagined by the heart, by wisdom, by the mind. Those who know this are immortal. He, the self, cannot be reached by speech, by mind, or by the eye. How can it be apprehended except by him who says, he is? By the words, he is he to be apprehended, and by admitting the reality of both the invisible Brahman and the invisible world as coming from Brahman, when he has been apprehended by the words, he is, then his reality reveals itself. When all desires that dwell in his heart cease, then the mortal becomes immortal and obtains Brahman. When all the ties of the heart are severed here on earth, then the mortal becomes immortal. Here ends the teaching. The person is not larger than a thumb. The inner self is always settled in the heart of men. Let a man draw that self forth from his body with steadiness, as one draws the pith from a reed. Let him know that self as the bright and immortal, yes, as the bright as the immortal. So remember, identify with this spirit before it's too late, and you have to experience these bodily attachments in the afterlife. And the taking out of the soul is not going to be easy on you. In that case, having received this knowledge taught by death and the whole rule of yoga, meditation. It's not just stretching and breathing and wearing sexy clothes. It's a system of connecting. Nachiketas became free from passion and death and obtained Brahman. Thus it will be with another also who knows what relates to the self. May he protect us both. May he enjoy us both. May we acquire strength together. May our knowledge become bright. May we never quarrel. Om, peace, peace, peace. Hari Om. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.